I'm really excited about our next interview. This is really special and means a lot to us here at the LineUp. So if you would help me in welcoming Christopher Moore of Trans Connect. Put your hands together. Thank you for being here. Please have a seat in this chair. You got some fans.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
This is going to be quite an education, I think, for our audience, the viewers, and for myself. And so, you know, when we initially met and talked, you just have this incredible, amazing energy and so much passion for what you do. And I was like, let's do a little piece on Christopher Moore. And I thought maybe we'd flash it up, you know, on our website. But then we met, and I was like, no, no, no. This man has to be on the show. And we've got to really, you know, talk more about what's going on. So
Thank
you
you.
have been instrumental in Pride
Thank
in
you.
Nelson.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was with a small group of people that started Pride in 1996. And it was exciting times and scary times.
That was like 19 years ago.
It was. It's going to be 20 years. This year will be the 20-year.
That's a
anniversary,
long
so
time
it'd be
ago
a
in the
big
movement.
Pride. And when
Yeah.
we actually, when we made a banner to go on Baker Street, we put transgender first. So all the LGBT was always at the end. T was always at the end. And at that time, people really weren't sure what T was. Some people thought it was tomatoes. So we put transgender first on our banner, which was really cool.
Oh, good.
But we don't use that same banner anymore. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you grew up in Florida, and
I
you
did.
found yourself in Nelson, and you created this Trans Connect. Maybe do a little synopsis of that journey. How did this all go?
From Florida to here.
Yeah, from Florida to
Just a
now.
little quick.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
yeah.
not quick. We got all night.
Yeah, I was born in Florida. I don't know. And I spent all my summers in Nova Scotia, and really felt like I was more Canadian and wanted to be living full time in Canada. So I moved here when I was in my early 20s.
Right.
And I was on the East Coast for the majority of time until 1990 when I moved here
Into Nelson.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so at that time in your life, what was happening for you?
What was happening for me? I identified as a butch dyke. I was working in trades. I was driving a snowcat. For 10 years I drove a snowcat here up in Selkirk Wilderness.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. And so, and your life's taken many twists and turns that have found you, you know, running this amazing organization that gives people information about the trans movement.
Yeah.
So maybe you could give us like a bit of an education, the layman, about what that means.
Sure. So I started Trans Connect because when I transitioned, when I got some language and identified who I was, saw a reflection of who I was. That was like in the mid-90s, and that was, there was no one else here identified in that way, and you couldn't get any services here. You had to go to Vancouver, and there's particular ways that you had to go about getting.
And when you mean services, you mean doctors?
Like I was going the medical route for quite a few years, identified it as transgender. I didn't go the medical route at first, and then a few years later I decided to go on hormones and get surgeries, and the only way to do that at that point was to do it through Vancouver.
Okay, which is a big journey.
It was a big journey, and so when I came back from that, so I went away for 2 years, and when I came back from that process, I wanted to make it easier here. I wanted to, so I started a support group called Gender Outlaws, just holding space for folks that identify as transgender.
And that was sort of the beginning.
And that was the beginning. So for 6 years we held space, Gender Outlaws, and then it just kind of blossomed from there, where I wanted to start doing Trans 101. I wanted to make it easier for services, you know, for people that went to mental health and addictions, for people that were trying to get jobs, for people that were accosted by the police. So I've done trainings with police and service providers, and I did a workshop in Elkford at a coal mine for 250 miners.
That's
So it's been
unbelievable.
quite
Yeah.
diverse. Our program runs the whole East and West Kootenays.
And you're talking about Trans 101.
Yeah,
And so basically with that, you go to the organization and you give them information.
Yeah, so what I do is I define, usually the workshop's about an hour and a half, so I'll just give you a little glimpse of it. So the word transgender is an umbrella term, and it's a term for people who, whatever they were assigned at birth doesn't match with who they are. So I was assigned female at birth, that's on my birth certificate. I didn't identify with being female. I was a tomboy, I was a butch, yeah. And so another piece of that is that it's an umbrella term, and it includes Two-Spirit people who are First Nations people. Not all First Nation people who are trans identify with Two-Spirit, but some do. And
by Two-Spirit, maybe explain that a little more.
well, it's difficult being a white person trying to explain that in native First Nation language, but basically it's First Nations people who identify with the spirit, have both the masculine and the feminine spirit, as well as third and fourth genders. More genders. There are more genders than two.
Very interesting.
So a good example of what we see in the media is we see just the binary system. For trans people, we're bombarded with, for instance, Caitlyn Jenner, who, went from one binary, male, to another binary, female.
Okay.
You see me, and that's what I look like. It looked like I identified as female, or I was assigned female at birth. I didn't quite look female my whole life, but, and now I'm seen as male. But the truth is that that's only, probably 20% of all transgender people. People identify as non-binary, people identify as butch, people identify as femme, there are many, many genders, and our youth today are really expanding. We need to pay attention to our youth, because they're not only are they getting it and using pronouns that are gender neutral, like they or them or their, in the singular form.
Right.
Instead of he or she.
Right. We're moving away from that now, aren't we?
We're totally moving away from those.
Like tonight, you put non-gender assigned washrooms for us tonight, which
Yes,
I thought
I
was
did.
a really good thing that maybe the college, we could ask them to keep,
So that's something allies can do in our community. That's something everyone here can do, is if you go into a washroom and you see it's female and it's only one stall, it's a single stall washroom, we'll ask the owner if they'll change it.
Yeah.
I have lots of signs I can give people to make the change, and there aren't many in Nelson, because we did that piece early on, like in the early 2000. We started doing that in our community, and we pretty well changed almost all the washrooms. There's one or two restaurants in town that people can will see, and you can go and do that, and start challenging yourself too. Like I always give people a challenge for 24 hours. Try and just use they, them, or their in the singular form, and not use.
I'll take that challenge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
No, I think we can really try and join in the movement and just be part of it. It just makes so much more sense to be involved, because I think that it's important. And I appreciate you being here for this reason, is because we need this education, as a community. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. There's some really tough statistics out there. It's really hard in this world to be trans youth in our communities and in Canada. These are, Canadian statistics is like over 48% of trans youth try and commit suicide.
That's a high number.
There's homelessness. The biggest fear of all LGBT youth, the biggest fear that they grow up with is if they come out, they might get kicked out of their home. They're not concerned about their grades or, who their friends are or what they're going to wear to the prom. they're afraid of either coming out themselves to their family or someone else outing them because they might be kicked out of their homes. And that's something we...
Losing support, losing love, losing that connectivity that they already have, but feeling so strongly that they need to make a change to be who they really are, right?
Absolutely. And I think that we can do a lot in our communities and allies to make that easier, make it, make changes so that it can be easier and more welcoming. I mean, I just was went to the AIDS, World AIDS Day, which was Tuesday night, December 1st.
Right.
And the theme this year was zero stigma. And, I look at the AIDS movement and how over the many, many years, how the medical piece of it has really changed, and now it's called a manageable disease and it's not a death sentence right away, but everybody has really, but it's still such huge stigma, and that's about being gay. It's like same as bullying in our schools.
Yeah, it's over it, aren't we?
Yeah, it's about gender expression or gay. Yeah, absolutely.
I just think, it's time.
Yeah.
Let's move past this.
Yeah.
This is something when we should be loving each other and not worried about, what gender someone is or what choice they make.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm with you.
And it's really, our youth today is really cool what they're doing, and they're changing our world in gender, and they're just opening up our world to show us that there are more than two, and we need to, we need to follow them. They're our leaders, and we need to really, back them up.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we do have a little piece of a film you made with Amy Bohegan. It is called Rural Transcapes. Would you mind setting that up for us, and we'll watch it together?
Sure.
With the audience?
Sure. So this film was made as it was made 6 years ago, so it's a little bit old. Like, the trans movement has changed so much in the world. But it was made to use as a training for service providers. There's a set of questions at the end. With what I learned when I was giving Trans 101 presentations to people who had no idea of what transgender was, what I learned early on was that once I started sharing my story, and I would bring other people in to share their stories, it would open up people's hearts and minds. It wasn't rocket science to me. It was like, these are people who, lived in a place that they just had no experience with this, and so they had a lot of fear, and there was some hate out there. And to see people just generally melt and just connect on a human level of, I think what people, cisgender people can relate to is that we all try and become more of who we are, and that's what transitioning is, no matter what your gender or your orientation
or what your journey.
Or what your journey is. Like, we all want to become more of who we are. So this clip is about the film that we made, that I worked with Amy Bohegan, who's an awesome filmmaker and a wonderful person.
Yes.
And it was really fun to work with her. And so we made this movie, and I have it, and we sell it, or you can borrow it at our library. TransConnect is housed at Anchors.
Excellent.
So it's...
Well, let's turn our attention to that for a minute. Everybody, please enjoy a little snippet of Rural Transcapes.
I get hassled because I'm a visible transsexual. My face, without surgery, is not going to change. My voice still gives me away. I am still 6 foot tall. I've got stupidly large hands and feet. People see these things and they notice.
A few of my colleagues will ask me about transgender patients, but it's in some respects almost a deafening silence. People are very happy for me to do it so that they don't have to.
When we first started dating, I was nervous that I would say the wrong things sometimes. It was an unknown world.
I've met people on the road who see me as a guy, and I've also met people who instantly peg me as a woman. And of course, how they relate to me, is different because of those perceptions.
One of the hardest things in the process that people have to come to is what they have to actually give up to be totally who they are.
I was married to a wonderful woman, so why would I transition when my transition ruined my marriage and everything? It was hard on my wife, but I couldn't not be who I am.
I I was having health problems that people shouldn't have when they're 25. And I couldn't sleep. And I couldn't stand to be touched. Sexually, when I transitioned, things got better over about 3 years.
Healing happened as I began to tell my story and educate people. One of our gender outlaw meetings, we asked a native healer to come and do a healing session for us. He told me that my gift was speaking and that I needed to go out in the world and tell my story and educate.
Transgender people make you examine what parts of you are male and female, and a lot of people find that very uncomfortable. That cuts rather close to the bone, and a lot of people would rather avoid than address.
People say, oh, I've never met a transsexual before. Well, you know what? You probably have. You just didn't know it.
Wow, very beautiful piece of work that you two did together.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
really
excellent.
great.
So do you want to sort of recap the film and just sort of maybe draw some of those ideas together for our audience?
So one thing I want to say, you hear the word transition a lot, and when I talked about the media, what the media portrays for transition is about sex change, basically. And that's what everybody's radar is about. Transition can mean many things. It can mean changing your gender identity. It can mean changing your markers on your driver's license and your birth certificate and all those things. It can mean going on hormones. It can mean surgeries. But there's no hierarchy here, and there's no one way to do it. It's like some people don't do any of those things. So it's just to open up our minds to that and get some good information than what's being seen in the standard media, because that's a really small percentage, and it's being it's just bigger than that. And the other thing I want to say is I mentioned cisgendered a few times, and I want to define that for you. So cisgender is if your birth's assigned, the doctor assigned you a sex and you relate to that gender, then you're cisgendered. So the majority of people in the world are cisgendered.
I see.
So basically not trans, but it's important to say it as a counterpoint to transgender, because everyone has gender identity. It's not just transgender people.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good point. I think people needed to hear that.
And there are lots of people in that movie. You can see, you saw people who work at grocery stores here in town that are artists, and people who are seen as trans do a lot of education just by being visible. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
And so it's not just one person doing a lot of education work at all. People do it all the time. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Thanks, Christopher.
Thank you.
Give it up for Christopher.
Thank you.
Well, Christopher has brought along some people with him tonight who are willing to talk on some of this gender movement, and so it's with great pride that I introduce to you Christina Morgan, Ojas Katz, and Mo Cordes. Hi! Thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Now, we've had some questions that have been submitted to us, and you guys are willing to answer. So I'm just going to go a little bit of a round and get you all to answer some questions. I'm going to start with Christina. Christina, number one, what is the most lacking for the local trans community, do you find?
I'd say medical resources.
Okay.
We're good in Nelson
Yep.
because of Christopher.
Is that right? Yeah.
But around BC, even Canada, it's really lacking. As for, therapists, doctors, you're waiting 2 years to
Really?
See a therapist for what we wait 4 weeks here.
Oh, you're kidding. So in smaller rural areas, is that what you're sort of saying? Like, so if you live out, then you're waiting on a waiting list or having to move to a different...
Travel 500 miles
Wow.
and wait 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's good to know, and know that it's such, you know, you've done good work here to be able to get that tightened up. 4 months seems like a doable amount of time. Ojas, I'll turn to you. What are some of the questions you get asked on a regular basis that are not appropriate to ask a trans person? I think that's a really important question.
Well, let me
That's
tell you,
really
there's a lot of those questions.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know, from
Yeah, long list.
very
Most
long
got a
list from, you know, what was your old name? To,
Oh, okay.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people don't want to identify with the way they were.
Right.
You
You
know,
want to, you moved
wanna-
on. You
Moved
grew
on,
up.
exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, the ever familiar one is, so have you had the surgery?
Oh, really? People
Yeah.
ask you that.
Oh, all the
Okay.
time. Sometimes they don't even ask me the question. They just point to my genital area.
Wow.
Have you had that?
That's
Well,
very appropriate.
yeah, not very appropriate.
Not perfect dinner conversation, people.
No, not at all. And I'm
Maybe
sure.
you got to choose your friends. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Who are you hanging out with? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure some of the trans women
Yeah.
get them. Are those real?
Yeah,
You know,
that's just,
that
no,
kind of
that's
stuff.
not
It's
fair. And that's
not fair.
educational. We need to know that, you know, as a community, these are things you don't ask. I
Yeah.
mean, those are pretty obvious ones, but then there's probably some others that are, you know, hurtful on a sub-level too. You just want to stay away from pointing the transition out, is basically for the person, because you don't know what their journey is.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
you just want to ask them, you know, mostly what they choose to use as their pronoun.
Okay.
You know, and how they choose to identify would be the best thing to
That's
ask.
the best way to
Yeah.
ask. Okay,
Sure.
excellent. Thank you so much. Mo, can you tell us how you identify within your gender and what pronoun you like to use in here? Good transition.
Well, I identify in my gender expression as fluid. I don't identify as male or female.
Okay, interesting. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, it really depends on what I'm doing,
Oh, cool.
what I'm wearing, who I'm with, am I working, am I
Right.
playing? It depends, it's quite situational actually.
Oh, that's very educational, you know. I think that people would be very interested to hear that. So what pronoun is it that you like us to use?
Well, I'm not comfortable with he or she,
Mm-hmm.
but if it happens where I get a he or a she, which is often, I get both.
Okay.
I prefer more of a gender neutral, like a
Right.
they. I'm not,
Okay, yeah.
we haven't come to a place, I think, in our
Mhm.
English language where there's something specific for this place
Okay.
that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that with the youth these days, that'll change.
Right.
Yeah.
As Christopher was saying earlier, there just seems like those are the youth are who we need to be paying attention to, and
Yeah.
they're changing this movement
Yeah.
ever so much. Excellent. Thanks, Mo.
You're welcome.
Christina, what have you experienced in the way of discrimination or transphobia since you came out?
Oh, just in public
Yeah.
from everybody. That you deal with. Like
Really?
most people are afraid of what they don't understand, so
Okay.
they either become aggressive or just don't talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mhm.
and especially jobs.
Really? So when you're applying for jobs, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's challenging. That's part of the movement, I think, that needs a big change. Like, what's the difference? If the person can do the job, or we need to look past those things. If that's the kind of person you are that needs that, you know? Thank you. What do you want to see change about that?
More education.
More education?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Kinda
Christopher's
the
got to keep on
one-on-one
the training.
workshops, but
Yeah.
do them province-wide.
Yeah.
You don't see that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like you live in a good support system here for that? Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just if you change your gender, does that make you straight?
I get asked that one a lot. And that goes with that whole binary thing,
Right,
right?
okay.
Where you know, oh well, you were, you know, born female, so now
Okay.
you're male. You know, it's that one or the other. There's no
Oh,
in between,
I
right?
see. Okay.
And so they automatically assume because I dated women previously.
Okay.
That now that I identify as what they see as male,
Right.
that they must, everybody assumes that now I'm straight because I still, I'm attracted to women. But actually, my gender expression, my sexuality with taking hormones and changing did change a little bit, actually.
Oh, interesting.
I found that being more open and identifying, now I identify, I guess, a little bit with that they pronoun.
Okay.
That I found that I'm attracted to both sexes, both genders now, where before it was strictly just female, and now I'm finding that I feel more fluid with both.
Oh, I appreciate your honesty in sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
that's very interesting. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, Mo, can you tell us a little bit of your story and how you got to be where you are today in your gender identity?
Let's see. Once upon a time.
Long
time ago. Let's see. I knew at a really young age that I was attracted to girls, and I grew up identifying as a boy. I thought I was a boy, basically. And into sports, I was called the tomboy, very expressive in my body. And as soon as I hit puberty, I was mortified that I grew breasts, I got my period, my hips went sideways, and I started to shut down.
Right.
And fast forwarding to 2 years ago, what happened for me was that my friendship with Christopher deepened. And I started getting curious about my gender. And it's been a real process. And I didn't know. I was completely unconscious about why I was suppressing my maleness. I was presenting as female, and there was a disconnect. And talking to Christopher really helped lay the groundwork for where I am now.
Okay.
And it's about bringing my maleness to the surface, my physical maleness, and blending with my femaleness.
Right.
And I am people think that I'm female and male. And as a kid, I was mortified, I don't know why, that even though I wanted to be a boy, they mistook me as a boy, and I would get angry. And now, when people think that I'm a boy or a girl, I smile. I don't get angry. I'm totally embracing.
Wow.
Embracing both.
Right. And that's been your transition story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's so great. So I think I'm just going to stick with you for a moment there then, because this question just seems like it goes so well with that. What advice would you offer parents of their trans or gender fluid child?
I think the first thing I want to suggest to parents is to drop their own story and their judgments of their child, anybody really, and to just stop and listen and be present for whoever is in front of you who's being so vulnerable to share, you know, what's really happening for them, and to support them.
Right.
To support them the best way that they want to be supported. Yeah.
We're seeing the movement starting earlier and earlier these days with parents, that there are some exceptional parents that are helping their children transition at early ages, aren't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also want to encourage the young people today to also take their experience into their own hands and go out and find their own resources and to empower themselves.
Be part of the movement, be part of the change. Yeah, as you all are by being here today, you are really, you know, educating this community, people that are watching over the internet, myself, much appreciation. So I thank you for that. I have a couple more questions, Christina. What do you think could be done to counter the hate and transphobia?
I think that goes with the last question you asked, is more education.
Right. Yeah, and us being on board together and understanding each other, I think. Yeah, good.
I think the more people see it, the more it's out there, it's not so scary and it's more common.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Excellent.
employers, they don't want to hire a visibly trans person because they're afraid customers will come in and not want to shop there. Because, you know, you see it a lot,
Right.
or they'll be worried about if the transgender person will get along with their employees. You know, so.
Well, we plead here at the lineup to employers both locally and Canada-wide as well as worldwide to please, you know, look at the resume, look at the person, and look past what might be your agenda, and don't, you know, like think what the public's going to think. Like, don't make that decision for us. That's not fair, right? It's not fair.
Yeah.
So I wish you much luck in your job search, of course. And Ojas, we have one more question tonight. I want to know what you know about taking hormones over time and if there are any side effects with those.
Oh, well, I mean, I think everybody's different, but
Right.
hormones, you know, there's really no real solid research, so
Okay.
we're sort of all, I guess, a bit of guinea pigs in a way.
Okay.
And especially over time, over a long period of time, because it is sort of a new thing, newish
Yes.
thing. So, I mean, everybody, there are side effects. I experienced some side effects myself from taking hormones,
Okay.
where it increases my red blood cell count, and I have to
Okay.
go regularly and have to have blood drained off every 3 or 4 months
Okay.
because my count gets high. There's other people that have other different things. But I think what the thing is I think we just forget the risks because those don't really matter. It's just because we want to be who we want to be that we take those risks because we want to be who we are.
And that's really truly living your whole life as who you want to be. And
Exactly,
why not?
yeah.
Whatever that means for you, and that's an individual thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all individual. Not everybody, like I said, everybody doesn't choose to take hormones. Not everybody does,
Right.
you know?
Of course. But if that's your choice,
Right.
you know, you got to change the movement for respect towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so honored that you would all be here tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your journeys, you know, what's coming up in your life. And thank you, Christopher,
you.
for leading this movement here.
Thank
it's
you for having
incredibly,
us.
incredibly special work.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good night.